I'm very proud to say that in this conference we have maintained the time very well. Uh, we will start on time now for our final section, the most important section, the valedictory address. May I request Professor Manmohini Kaul to kindly take over the proceedings.
So, good afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you to the valedictory session of the 10th Biennial International Conference of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies. I congratulate the IAAPS. I also congratulate Professor Lipi Ghosh for holding this extremely timely and successful conference. It is only thanks to Professor Lipi Ghosh who, by her pervasive charm, was able to get me out of my comfort zone from Shimla into the rigors of intellectual discourse, which is where I truly belong. Thank you, Lipi, for getting me here. And in the last 2 days, we have heard several eminent speakers discuss the challenges and opportunities of contemporary India and Southeast Asia relations and on varied relevant themes. Since the launch of India's Act East policy in November 2014 by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, many significant developments have taken place in world affairs that have considerable bearing on the geopolitics of the region. No nation can afford to be complacent in today's complex and competing world. Strategic thinking involves far-sightedness and overcoming inertia to play a pivotal role in building consensus while keeping focus on the larger economic and strategic implications. To put the engagement with ASEAN on even higher trajectory and introspection of India's relationship with the region is key to consolidate the gains made so far and remove the obstacles that many hinder further progress. For this, India has to ensure that its Act East policy continues to remain relevant and active in the coming years as well. In order to fill the essential gaps in its policy towards the ASEAN region, India needs to focus on important areas when seen from the paradigm of connectivity, commerce, diplomacy, and most of all, security. I'm not going to go into details. Already many have discussed the China factor and others. In the post COVID-19 world, where countries have a marked inward focus in the short term, regional cooperation, in my view, offers tremendous potential for economic growth and poverty reduction, as well as for peace and stability. We know the destabilizing influences working to create a rift in the ASEAN. I will leave it as there is. I would not take over the time from the valedictory address, except to say that in today's strategic twists and turns in the contiguous region, where you have aggressive, abrasive, assertive China, India has taken up a very growing role in having convergence with Indo-Pacific countries, and that in India's foreign policy, they no longer remain on the periphery. In the end, I would like to say that although in the present and in the future, there may be divergence of views on certain issues like RCEP, this will in no way affect the durability of India-ASEAN relations. I now turn to Ambassador Pinaki Ranjan Chakravarti to deliver the valedictory address. Ambassador Chakravarti served in many eminent positions, including India's ambassador to the Philippines. My PhD was on the Philippines foreign policy, High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Ambassador to Thailand, and Secretary Economic Relations in the MEA. Currently, Ambassador Chakravarti is a visiting fellow with ORS Regional Studies Initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a great pleasure to be here with such a knowledgeable audience and having heard such an array of interesting papers. But I really don't know where to begin. But let me begin by wishing you all Shubho Bijoya, as we say in Bengali. Belated but nevertheless relevant. Now, there is a saying which is attributed to some Chinese, who's never been identified, that may you live in interesting times. And I think I think we are living in interesting times. And one of the things that is adding to our digital prowess is these conferences and webinars where we are learning to mute and unmute various things and trying to see each other. It would have been so much better to do all this in person, but nevertheless, I think this is a platform that is quite a boon for all of us. We can continue our dialogue, and I have decided that what I'm going to say is not going to cover what has already been said. There's no point repeating some of the facts and figures. We already have, I think, information overload in terms of brilliant papers that I have. Some of them I have missed, but most of them I've tried to hear. So I will focus on certain issues that I feel are in the macro sense and perhaps a bit of futuristic as to where we are heading, where we are going, in my view, of course. And we can parse all the negatives and positives of what India has been doing or what other countries have been doing. But I think this is an important point in our history, and we are living in interesting times in the sense that the Quad. I mean, many of us thought that the Quad would never take off, but it has, and I think it is going to play an increasingly important role in Asia and the Indo-Pacific. And now it is Asia where the most, the balance of power efforts that are taking place, in a very rigorous manner, and Indo-Pacific, obviously. Now, it's interesting that this 2+2 and the recent agreement that have been signed. I can't but reflect on some anecdotal things like, in 1984, we signed an MOU on technology transfer with the USA, which was perhaps the beginning of this journey in many ways of engaging with the US on technology. And because we were the sort of target of many technology denial regimes. But it's always nice to reflect on this history, the cycle, how it sort of has turned, and today India and USA are actually growing in a security partnership. And it was a time when this was not so, and we were called estranged democracies. But the Look East policy, for example, we all are very excited. We were very excited, and when it became Act East, we thought a lot of more things would happen. Sometimes you again reflect on history and find that this was not the first time India was looking east. And I think India has looked east in its past for over a millennia. If we go back to various points in our history, Kalinga Empire, all of this has been said always. Now, what I'm trying to get at is that given all these things which has already been said, what are we? Where do we sort of begin in the sense? I think the beginning has to be with the rise of China, and the so-called peaceful rise is now an unpeaceful rise, actually, because of what China has been doing. And I think China is the prime mover of many of these geopolitical trends that we see today in terms of the Quad and other things. And its economic dominance is incredible. Today there was in 1996, China's defense expenditure was 1/16th of the USA or something like that. Today it is let's say about almost half of that of the USA. Forget the hidden expenditure that they all have. But it's also interesting that China still spends more on internal security their budget is greater than their defense budget still. It's interesting also in the sense that some of the reactions which we heard from uh, Professor Bali, is it? I think about the Chinese, reactions and their scholars what they are thinking. Recently, I mean, yes, today only I was reading some of those who follow, not me, but other colleagues who are Chinese speakers, who've been reading the Chinese version of the Global Times, and it's very interesting. Some of the things that have been pointed out there. It seems that China's reaction to the 2+2 and the BECA, they have been taken a little bit by surprise. And it seems that one of them, for example, is writing that, harking back to Kissinger, saying that China is only seeking its just place in the world. That kind of comments are coming. And also, I think there is another one which talks about that India and China, of course, have a long civilization history and commonalities, and we will sort it out. We know we are very wise people, and we will sort it out and things like that. These are all standard comments coming out of China. These are very template-oriented comments. But I think it also shows a trend as to what is happening in China. And the recent conference that has just concluded has also, laid out what China is going to do till 2035 and things like that. It's worth looking at all those things. But the point is that we never expected COVID. The jury is still out there as to what really happened. China has been hiding a lot of things, and let us see where actually this thing came from. There is a new article that I read recently which says that it was not out of the Wuhan virology lab, but actually a PLA lab, not very far from there, that it seems to have escaped from there deliberately, accidentally, we do not know. But whatever it is, that we are now well into the pandemic and dealing with its effects on us, in our societies, and our own economies. Now, there is no doubt that China has risen. Now, many of in the Western literature, you find mention of what you would all know as the Thucydides trap, the Sparta and Troy, etc. That conflict is inevitable when two powers rise. Now, what happened to, over 2 millennia ago need not happen again. And I think that template is all wrong. And I have already written about how wrong that template is. Today, you live in a nuclear world, and you can't think of conflict as inevitable, because I don't think it is inevitable. But yes, competition is inevitable, and that's going to carry on for a fairly long time. Now, in the process of change, which I call disequilibrium in the international or global order, or there is some kind of balance that we got used to. But today that balance has been eroding, or shall we say, has degraded to an extent that you have new trends that are coming up. If you recall, that disequilibrium also involves adaptation. And India is no stranger to that adaptation. I think we adapted very quickly from non-alignment to aligning with the Soviet Union, and then even asking the USA for help in '62. Then, of course, in '71, we had a kind of an alignment. And then we, of course, justified non-alignment as basically creating space for pursuing your own interest. I mean, that was another way of nuancing non-alignment at that time. Now, at that time, of course, bipolarity was prevailed, and I think we were clear about that we don't want to get close to one power or the other. But are we going to get into another bipolarity of a different kind in the future that the trends are beginning to show? I think the post-COVID world order will be underlined by three things: adjustment, adaptation, and amelioration. I mean, I've chosen these three A's to define how countries are going to react. And what I would sort of feel is that China has now well on the way to recovery and is also kind of weaponizing the COVID sort of opportunity. And we talked about the vaccine diplomacy and how it is being promising vaccines to all the countries, etc. So there is clearly a renewed Chinese engagement in terms of the post-COVID world order in a different way. The economics is still there. And of course, that poses great challenges for us. And India's challenges are very clear that that we have to have a new kind of engagement. And the economy would be very, very important. The Quad is evolving, and ASEAN and BIMSTEC and the Bay of Bengal community, these are the, I think, principal pillars of what I would say would be India's sort of approach to the changing sort of world. But also, I would like to recommend that that the vaccine diplomacy also opens opportunities for India. After all, India is the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world, and China is trying to play catch up. But if we get the vaccine going, then I think we will be the largest producer and perhaps the provider of the vaccine to a lot of countries. We have talked about decoupling. I completely agree that decoupling is not easy. It's not going to be easy, perhaps impossible to some extent, because we will be coupled in many ways. But we can do selective decoupling, which is happening. One of them, of course, is in the digital domain that has seen some element of decoupling. How much you can do is, of course, anybody's guess. I mean, if you look at certain figures, for example, Maruti Suzuki, the largest car manufacturing company in India, gets about 200 different parts for their cars from China. So when asked why are you importing from China, they said because it's the cheapest source, and at the factory gate it outbids any other manufacturer. So those are some of the issues that we have to now deal with. So decoupling in trade and technology will be a limited thing. And I do not think the whole difference between Cold War I and, if I may call Cold War II, if it at all happens, is that China is not the Soviet Union, and China will never be, has never been the Soviet Union. And China's integration with the global economy gives it a leverage that the Soviet Union never had. And I think those will be the deciding sort of, a lot of deciding factors in where we are heading. Now, there are countervailing and counterbalancing moves that are being made. Quad, of course, is one of them. You may have heard of the Blue Dot Network and the SCRI, which is the value chain sort of relocation initiative. Japan, USA, Australia, India, and others. The same Quad are involved in some of these things. And but as I said, China's economic profile and dominance, it would not be easy to counter that. And I think when you look at one of the reasons why, of course, we went out of RCEP is because that would have given a backdoor to China for even greater ingress into the Indian economy, which we didn't want. I don't think that was such a bad decision, because we do have a FTA with ASEAN, and I think we can work within that. We have FTAs with other countries in the region. We have a BIMSTEC FTA coming up. I think those will more or less cover some of our economic and trade sort of goals that we have been trying to achieve in this region. The other, of course, is the current conflict that we have with China in Ladakh is having some other impact on other places. For example, on the Kaladan project, the Arakan insurgencies are targeting that, and is one of the reasons why it's becoming very, very difficult to complete all the bridges and other things that are that still remain to be done. But I think the relationship between India and Myanmar has now progressed to a level where the Myanmarese military is cooperating in terms of hunting these Arakanese insurgents down, and so that they don't disturb the development aspect of the connectivity that we are trying to establish. Now, the other thing, of course, is that there is one thing that is to be said that about when we talk about ASEAN and BIMSTEC. In my view, ASEAN will be ambivalent in this whole Indo-Pacific. And although individual countries in ASEAN may try to link up bilaterally with India or with other countries, but I think ASEAN is too involved in protecting its centrality, etc., and its economic interests with China to take a position on the Quad or even take sides in this developing sort of bipolarity or Cold War. My own view is that that ASEAN, that China will also play that game, not push ASEAN too far and too hard, so that ASEAN does not sort of move into any sort of camp, so to speak. But I think individual ASEAN countries, and here I would like to say that perhaps Vietnam and Indonesia may have a little different view in terms of engaging with not the Quad, but at least with India and USA and others in a kind of a individual and bilateral way. Now, the other point, of course, about ASEAN is that if you have read about a former Singapore Foreign Secretary's recent speech at a think tank, where he actually lambasts Cambodia and Laos in a very, very harsh language, and in fact going to the extent saying that these two countries should be kicked out of ASEAN. So it's not so easy within ASEAN itself. I think Cambodia and Laos have become Chinese pawns to an extent that it is even worrying the other ASEAN countries. So there are internal issues. BIMSTEC, for example, if I were to talk about internal issues, we of course have the Rohingya issue. I mean, which is creating tensions with Bangladesh and Myanmar. We have insurgencies in the northeast, which has been, I've just talked about that is creating difficulties for the connectivities that we have thought of, etc. Now, the future, where are we heading? And I think the future is important. Are we getting into a situation of conflict? I doubt it. I think, but there will be jostling and competition for influence and power. And is there going to be a bipolarity again? Maybe not, but maybe yes, in the sense that if the Quad develops in a particular way, and when Putin was asked recently that can you envisage an alliance between a military alliance between Russia and China, he said that, well, it's a theoretical question, and in theory it's possible. So he also talks about encourage that line of thinking that China and Russia may get into an alliance. If that kind of thing starts happening, well, although I doubt it, Russia will ever do that. It has its own problems with China. But I think we are getting into what I call is a multipolar bipolarity. Or call it what you like. We can all think of nice names for it. That there will be perhaps two groups in two areas, with another group of countries not willing to perhaps take sides and sort of engaging with all sides. So that's the kind of thing that is developing. Now, I think what is finally there is another point that this power struggle that you see, or the balance of power struggle that is playing out, is likely to lead to perhaps some solution, because we don't know who's going to come into the White House on the 3rd of November. And I've been hearing commentaries which seem to suggest that it could be Biden. But then what happens? I mean, what kind of changes or nuancing that we will see? My own view is that we will see nuancing, but no major shift in direction as far as American policies are concerned. It is significant that the 2+2 dialogue took place in Delhi in person and not virtually, and significant that the BECA was signed, and it clearly shows that if there is a bipolarity or Cold War II coming up, I think India has made her choice very clear that on which side we will be standing. So that is one aspect that has become clear as far as the Quad is concerned. China itself has internal issues and problems. I mean, it's a very large country. and there is an aging sort of issue, demographic issue, and all these things. How long it will take to have an impact economically, it's difficult to say. But I think what will happen is that the BIMSTEC and the ASEAN, these two groups, BIMSTEC needs to be, of course, energized in many, many ways. And I hope the government of India does that. And ASEAN will have to, of course, re-engage and expand. But ultimately, I think what we are looking at is that this so-called value chains and manufacturing, I think that aspect has to be looked at far more, critically, in the sense that we can cherry pick on the value chains and choose where we want to be or we don't want to be. It is a fact and a reality that China has investable surplus that no other country has today. And that is something that we cannot ignore. And we have allowed China to invest. And there is no harm in allowing investments to come in areas that we want, not in areas that they want. So I think that aspect has to be honed and refined in terms of how we deal with China and its investments. Please note that during the sort of 2+2 meeting in Delhi, while Pompeo and Esper were sort of growling away at China, etc., the comments made by our defense minister and an external affairs minister, my esteemed batchmate in the foreign service, if I may say so, and they were far more nuanced. I don't think they even mentioned China. And in fact, one of the press releases was withdrawn because somebody had put in China. They said, in these difficult times when we are facing aggression in our northern borders, etc., without naming China, they said all this. So I think there is still an element of keeping the door open as far as India is concerned in dealing with China. And it is now the ball is in China's court as to how they want to deal with it. And the negotiations, etc., that are taking place for disengagement are not making much headway. But demands have been placed; they are being examined, and China is coming up with some, some kind of refinement of its demands. The latest being that let us first remove our heavy equipment, tanks and artillery, etc. First, it demanded that we vacate the sort of high ground, south of the lake, etc. But now it is refining its demands, and I think we will see more such things happening. I doubt if there is going to be an all-out conflict, but I think this is going to be a fairly long, drawn-out affair because the winter, I don't know how many of you have ever been that side, but it is so harsh that I can't even describe it. So I don't think anybody would want to be there during the winter. But this is being forced on us. Of course, China probably feels that this will drain our resources, weaken India, etc., which is their strategy in any case. And so ultimately, what is going to happen is that what we will have is unless there is some change within China and unless there is a change of tactics or strategy by China, which I don't see happening very easily, and I would even put the label unlikely. So we are going to be in this position, and we will have to evolve our policies given that in mind. But ultimately, I think what is going to happen now is that for India, what are the options? I think there is only one option. If you all remember during the election campaign of Bill Clinton, which he won finally, and I was those days in the Americas days, there was a major slogan called "It is the economy, stupid," and I think for us also we must remember that it is the economy, stupid. Without the economic heft, etc., we can all be very argumentative here and have great plans. After all, we are argumentative Indians, and we will have these plans. But I don't think we are going to, make much headway if our economy does not permit it. So the economic dimension is so important. No foreign policy can be successful without a strong economy. And we can only give so much to foreign policy that your domestic, the resources that you generate domestically, can provide. So I think that is one thing that we have to keep in mind. While we do holding operations, etc., everywhere, and we continue with certain policies, our primary focus has to be the economy. Unless we grow economically, there will not be surpluses generated that we can deploy to foreign policy goals. I mean, let us not forget that foreign policy is a is a subset of your national policy. It is not independent, and it cannot be run by foreign office or the external affairs or diplomats. And just because if you don't have the resources, then nothing is going to happen. Because we will make a lot of nice statements and make plans, but without the resources, I don't think we will be going anywhere. And as of now, we cannot compete with China for resources. I mean, let's face it, and we know that. I mean, we all know, we are realists, and we've been on the ground, so we know that. So I think, to my mind, I think the government of India must focus on the economy, and the revival of the economy should be its first priority. I mean, this is not rocket science. I think this is, everybody knows it. So I think that is the important aspect of it. And I think foreign policy, etc., will evolve from there. I mean, or whatever plans that we have to do this and do that. Recently, the BIMSTEC senior officials meeting was held in Colombo. They laid out certain plans that we have to do this. We have to set up a trade and technology center. Where are the resources going to come from? The BIMSTEC, for example, has been starved of resources. And we talk about BIMSTEC being, our highway to the east, and we have to build a Bay of Bengal community, etc. So whatever we want to build and whatever future we see for ourselves has to be built on our domestic economy. I am very clear on it. I think most of us are very clear on it, and I think we need to refocus our attention on this aspect, that there is no foreign policy without a strong domestic economy. I mean, you can have foreign policy, but it'll hardly carry any heft without. And as of now, I think we have to ensure that whatever the resources that we have are deployed intelligently and smartly, in the sense that we have to now spend more on defense and military. We have to now spend a lot on holding the Chinese where they are, through maybe a year-long deployment till we can reach some solution. We will have to expand our navy because China is making a lot of ingress into things. We have to invest in our neighbors, at least except for Pakistan, which is a gone case in any case. So I think we have to do that to counter the Chinese footprint, which is already there. And I think these are some of the things. But we do have advantages. It's not that the China holds all the cards. We do have advantages. We do have certain civilizational and other inputs. There have been papers on soft power and things like that. We have to utilize them more, I think, in the sense that open up certain sectors to our neighbors, etc. We've done that over the years, for example, free trade, less non-tariff barriers, etc. Let them export to India. But I think we should also be very wary of Chinese. In Bangladesh, for example, the Chinese economic zone can become another headache for us, because when they start manufacturing there, and with Bangladesh's duty-free entry into India, we might have another problem there. So I think the rules of origins have to be tightened as to how much we can allow imports from Bangladesh if China starts manufacturing in the economic zone, which they will do because they will find a foothold there. Like we also have been given two economic zones where it is hoped that Indian companies will invest and maybe export from there to India and elsewhere, whatever it is. I mean, these are some of the plans in the pipeline. But I think what ultimately will matter as far as India is concerned is, of course, the engagement that we already have. But again, I have to come back to the fact that we have to allocate more resources to foreign policy within the domestic pie that we have. And that's a very, very difficult exercise for our political leadership, with so much demands coming from all other sectors, etc. At this difficult time when I think state governments are running out of money, and revenues is not picked up to the extent, the pre-COVID extent. We have very difficult choices to make. So it's not a very comfortable time to be in, and it's. I'm sorry to sound negative, but we have to be realistic, and we are realists in many ways in when we formulate foreign policy, and because we know how much resources that we can get, but we do have other elements of our foreign policy which can attract a lot of things. In BIMSTEC, for example, I think a reorientation is taking place in terms of, let's say, digital training and things like that, where we do have advantages. And I think those are the domains that we need to focus on now, where not too much resources have to be deployed, but you can still carry on with things like training, digital, IT, which are, you can do it from a distance. You don't have to physically travel. But ultimately, I think there is no alternative to physical, people to people, business to business contacts that we have to build. So I think the priorities are very clear. The connectivity issues have to be dealt with because travel, trade, and leisure industry depend on connectivity. So slowly these things will happen, and then we'll have to see how fast we can move these things and go back to the pre-COVID normal, and how to change some of our laws, etc. When I was ambassador in Thailand, I was to be repeatedly asked by Thai businessmen very keen to invest in India. They would say, Ambassador, give us in 1 page or okay, 2 pages what we have to do to set up an industry in India. So I tried very hard to set it up, but then I ran into a blizzard of regulations and etc. And they just don't understand that if the central government in Delhi is saying it, why is the state government not doing it? So this kind of federal federal structure or whatever center state issues that come in the way of, I think, investments is very, very important. So we studied certain investments. The Central Group of Thailand, which is one of the largest business houses, did in Andhra, for example. It was shrimp farming. And so we saw it through, and they do export shrimps from there back to Thailand, because Thailand is a great consumer of shrimps, and so is Japan and most of these Southeast Asian countries. So there are issues here that we'll have to, and much of it is domestic, how to cut through the bureaucratic fluff and the center state issues that sometimes get into, when investments find these things, they get turned away. I don't think they can, some of them just cannot, navigate this maze. And this is from personal experience, I can tell you. But some have the capacity, some do manage. It's not that all of them are, but some get worried and then they sort of turn away. They said, "Oh, it's easier there. Let's go there." So it goes away from India to some other country, Vietnam, for example. Well, I don't want to get into comparing systems. This is not a good thing because China is a different, is a one-party authoritarian state, and one person decides, and India is not like that, and we are a chaotic democracy, etc. But we'll have to navigate all this, and we'll have to find a way out of this, dip that we are in today. So I think I can stop here, and perhaps comments would be most welcome.
So should we proceed? There's too much of sound.
Have you muted yourself?
May I request if there's questions people would like to ask Ambassador Chakravarti? It was very enlightful valedictory address, and we may agree on certain points and disagree on others, but there must be people who may want to ask questions. Are there anyone?
Most welcome.
May I ask your questions,
Of
Ambassador?
course.
I would like your opinion on Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, India hasn't joined, and I think there are lots of. I mean, it isn't going as well as it's publicized. To comment on that.
Well, when this whole thing came up, there was a huge debate internally in India. That one side said that, oh, let's cherry pick on it, which was kind of what Chinese were trying to goad us into. That you take what you want, but be part of it, because they were very keen that India should be part of it. But then I think the weight of opinion shifted, because I think the sovereignty issue became Pakistan got sort of involved in this whole thing, the CPEC, etc., and all that. The Chinese tried to persuade us very hard, I must say, that they pulled out all the stops and said that we will adjust everything for you, but you just join, and we will it's a great opportunity for you will get a lot of investments and infrastructure and things like that. But then, I think when you when decisions are taken, finally, it's the political leadership which has the final call, and the final call was made, and we decided that we don't want to be part of BRI. It was not simply the technical aspect of it; it was also the strategic aspect of it that worried us, and in terms of where, I mean, if China, you see, the signaling was very important. If India joined, then every other country would have. And as it is, they have many of them. But then we did throw in a little bit of spanner in the works, because then there were some doubts raised. Hambantota actually, was a red flag for many countries, and I think countries became more careful. They realized that we might just get into so much of debt with China that China will then come and take over Hambantota or whatever else, etc. And then they've seen how Pakistan has dealt with it, and how Pakistan has gone into all these projects. You won't believe it, but the power projects, the people of Pakistan are paying 25 times higher than what they should to the Chinese companies in terms of per unit cost of electricity. So that is creating a lot of problems for them as well. So I think, you see, Chinese companies, China's policies when it comes to business is highly mercantile. And I don't think all this BRI business, because if you read some of the Chinese literature, some of them have made very clear BRI is not a philanthropic project. It is meant for Chinese companies to make money. And so I think those kind of realizations are there now. But I think people are going to be more careful. I doubt if now, of course, the door is slammed shut by China itself, by what it did in Ladakh. That there's no question of India now joining the BRI.
Anyone else would like to ask a question?
So there is a question by Dr. Probir De. He's asking, what will India lose if it does not inch towards the US?
What will? Sorry?
What will India lose if it does not inch towards the US?
Look, you see, now the choices have been made, but we did not want actually to have this deepening security relationship. We were trying to give China some space. Let's not quibble with that. But it is China which has now decided that it doesn't want to give India that space. So hence we are left with not much choice, and so we have to get into this counterbalancing mode, because the economic, if we were a $20 trillion economy, maybe it would be different, because then our economic heft would have given us some more leverage, or we could have leveraged that into foreign policy options. But we don't have that. So I think the security aspect of it, and we do have a fairly powerful military, which I think it is acknowledged, and the Americans have always been pursuing us for this for a very, very long time. And but we have actually fended them off. But now I think the circumstances have created a situation. I'll go back to adaptation, that we have adapted. I mean, it's not that we have not adapted. So this is another phase in that adaptation as the global balance of power changes and our countries rise and countries decline. So I think this is inevitable in many ways, and our choice may also be inevitable because I would blame China for it. And if China had kept the door open and kept some given some space, then I think it may not have happened also. But China has its own goals, and China does not want any peer. It wants to be the, shall we say, the panchayat chief, and other panchayat members are not going to they don't want anybody else. I mean, they want to sit in the chairman's chair, and everybody else has to either accept that or confront it or get into confrontation with China.
Anushwar Boshurai Choudhury has a question. Do you think health diplomacy is going to be a new facet of BRI?
Well, I think I've already mentioned vaccine diplomacy, which is a kind of a health diplomacy. I would, in fact, in BIMSTEC, there is now discussion that healthcare should now come right on top, because apart from transnational crimes and etc., and fisheries and all these things. You see, with employment opportunities decreasing, there is this thing about the transnational crimes and etc. is going to increase. And I think the fisheries sector, where there is a lot of illegal poaching, etc. You may have now read about the Philippines government, trying to set up a new, agency, which is kind of, what China does. The PLA maintains a lot of these fishing boats, which are basically, in civilian disguise, and so they go around, where the PLA ships don't go, but they unleash these fishing boats to do their job. I think Philippines is trying to emulate that and trying to do those kind of things. So I think in the maritime domain, you will see some of these things. Pushbacks are happening in slowly, but somewhere, wherever the country feels that its interests are being. Indonesia, for example, in the Natuna Islands, does have a problem, and so I think there are issues, but China will be very, very careful about ASEAN. I think because they want to protect ASEAN's sort of not centrality, but really they want to ensure that ASEAN doesn't swing towards the Quad. And even in BIMSTEC, I think they are going to plan. They will try to sort of sort of swing one or two countries away from the mainstream. And SARC, for example, has already they have managed to do that by weaning Pakistan away from SARC. So they will try to do that again in BIMSTEC and ASEAN. And I just narrated to you the reaction of the former Singapore Foreign Secretary, which was very harsh. And so they are also conscious of it. They realize that China is trying to divide them, etc. So let us see. I mean, how far it can go. But healthcare diplomacy and health diplomacy is going to rise in the priority list. And I think India is planning some kind of move along those lines.
There's one last question by one of our young scholars, Shutirtho Bedoggo. He's asking, why are we always talking about conflict and competition with China? Why not cohesion? Where will conflict lead us?
Well, I think the answer is very clear. If China had sorted out the border problem, we would be cooperating with China. We have no problem with China otherwise. We only have the border problem. Now, if China were smart enough to solve this border problem, but it does not, because it does not want India. I don't know, but China certainly sees India as some kind of competitor in some way. Clearly, otherwise, why would it adopt a policy like this? Why not solve the border in some way? and we were prepared. I mean, after all, status quo was there, LAC was there, etc. But then again, I think it has Pakistan in mind because it has to keep Pakistan happy. It's a proxy after all against India. So I think there are many factors as to why China has not been able uh, to clearly. I mean that if they sorted the border problem, India would not have gone with the Quad or anybody, and we could have had normal relations with China. There is no problem with that. I think we still don't have a problem with having economic relations. After all, China is a major trading partner, and investments also have come in from China. So we were going along that path till this whole thing happened. And so I don't know. I mean, Quad was, of course, there, and we were sort of leveraging that as well, and sort of signaling to China that if you upset this balance, then I think then it will we might move towards the Quad in a more serious manner, which is what has happened.
We still have time, I think. I have what time we have? 5 minutes. Uh, then, Ambassador Chakravarti, I would like you to. We haven't touched on the topic of. We are talking about Act East policy and India's convergence with Australia and, of course, Japan because of the worry from China and the Quad issue. All this comes from that they are also. It is a major trading partner for Australia, but Australia has been pushing its relation to be closer to India. Would you like to comment on that? Maybe this could be the last comment.
Okay. Yes, Australia has been doing that because even when before it had its spat with China, and China reacted, and Australia reacted, and things like that. Particularly after the COVID demand came in from Australia that there should be an international inquiry. And there was nothing wrong with that. It was in WHO that every pandemic has some kind of investigation, inquiry, gathering information. But the way China behaved was clearly a different China in the sense that it showed its teeth, to basically Australia, and it's showing its teeth to everybody now. I think around their periphery, and China has disputed borders with 11 countries, and so I think the Chinese sort of desire to be number one and the hegemon in Asia, if not the world, has sort of, I don't know, consumed them to such an extent that they probably are unwilling to back off now. And I don't know where it's going to head, but the pushback against China has certainly begun, and that should. I don't know. They will probably factor that in. But at the moment, Chinese have thing about, face, as we all know. I mean, backing off too early might be interpreted as having lost face. So they won't do that very quickly. But over the long run, I don't know. Maybe it might happen because if this thing gets stronger, and if China also starts, biting harder, then I think the pushback will also get stronger. And I think the whole area, the whole Asia will be, of course, subject to all these pulls and pressures, and somewhat and a little bit of destabilization also will take place. But I think this happens in when as I say, disequilibrium is the underlying feature of an international order or a global space.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Pinat Ranjan Chakraborty, for that absolutely scintillating ending to our two-day conference. Thank you, Professor Manmohini Kaul, for chairing this session so beautifully. We just have one final pleasantries to perform. May I now request the Joint Secretary, Dr. Nandini Bhattacharya, to give the vote of thanks.
So at the conclusion of the two-day-long program of 10th Biennial Conference of Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies, I am bestowed with the pleasant responsibility to express our gratitude to various institutes, organizations, and personalities we are indebted to make this event possible. I shall begin with our heartfelt thanks to Honorable Chair of the inaugural session, Professor Jayanto Kumar Ray, for conducting a smooth and successful inaugural session and adding his valuable insight at the end of the session. We are extremely grateful to our distinguished guests, namely Honorable Ambassador Mr. Rajiv Bhatia for his illuminating keynote address. We are also grateful to Honorable Ambassador Mr. Gautam Mukhopadhyay for his thoughtful deliberation. Our heartfelt thanks go for the two collaborating institutions, University of Calcutta and Asia Center, Bangkok, to make the conference materialize. We especially thank Honorable Vice Chancellor Madam, University of Calcutta, Professor Shonali Chakraborty Banerjee, for her kind address and also for allowing IAAPS to utilize the webinar platform from the University G Suite. Our sincere gratitude to Dr. James Gomez, Regional Director, Asia Center, Bangkok, who remained our international collaborator for this particular conference. We extend our gratitude to all keynote speakers of previous IAAPS biennials for sending their kind words at this historic moment of 10th Biennial. I would like to acknowledge the contribution of all the chairpersons conducting several sessions in this 2 day long academic engagement, namely Professor Parul Pandadhar, Professor Achinto Datto, Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee, Professor Rajagopal Dhar Chakraborty for yesterday, and Dr. Anusha Bashirai Chaudhuri, Dr. James Gomez, Dr. Robin Ramcharan for today. A very special acknowledgement is due for all the esteemed panelists who could make it for the engaging discussion, and a heartfelt gratitude to the chair of this panel, Dr. Prabir De. Thank you all. Professor Mushirul Rahman from Bangladesh, Ms. Charita Fernando from Sri Lanka, Dr. Tin Lat from Myanmar, Professor Do Thu Ha from Vietnam, Dr. Mala Rajo from Malaysia, Dr. Sinderpal, no, he was not there, Dr. Rizal Damuri from Indonesia, and Professor Deepak, China. A very special thanks go to Professor Manmohini Kaul as a chair for the valedictory session, and Honorable Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakraborty for his very illuminating valedictory address. A sincere thanks on behalf of IAAPS to Dagon University, Myanmar, for their support and cooperation. Our very special gratitude to our technical assistants, Mr. Shomolesh Guchai, for this whole arrangement and management of the conference on webinar mode, connecting us, quote unquote, from nowhere and everywhere. My sincere thanks also extends to all the paper presenters who, in spite of all challenging and changing circumstances, remain steadfast in their academic commitment to make this event meaningful. Finally, I would like to thank some in-house members of IAAPS whose constant encouragement and hard work made this conference a reality. Our first acknowledgement goes to our president, Professor Parthasarathi Ghosh, for his constant support and encouragement. A special thanks goes to the very spirit of the organization, presently the vice president, Professor Lipi Ghosh, for her tireless effort to bring everything to happen in this scale. A sincere thanks to the Secretary, Professor Sharbani Guptu, for her steadfast coordination and silent work in cooperation with all the members. A note of deep gratitude to Dr. Anusha Bashirai Chaudhuri, Treasurer of IAAPS, for her every helpful presence at any end that IAAPS needed her ideas and inputs. A special acknowledgement to the two young members of the Executive Committee of IAAPS, Dr. Rajat Kanti Shur and Shiladitya Bosu, for their hard work and sincerity. A note of thanks to Shutirtha Vedoggo for a very melodious and appropriate rendition of Rabindra Sangeet. And a wholehearted acknowledgement to the entire EC of IAAPS for always being up and alert to perform their individual and collective duties to make this conference successful. And last but not the least, we would remember the void of some members and well-wishers we have lost in this 2 decade long journey of IAAPS. Our ex-Vice President, Professor Purushottam Bhattacharya, was a keen supporter of every positive step taken by IAAPS till he breathed his last in March 2020. We miss him and acknowledge his huge contribution to IAAPS. We have also lost a well-wisher of our organization, Professor Chauhan, who had been our generous host in Jivaji University, Gwalior in 2006 and had been in touch with IAAPS since then. We acknowledge his benevolent contribution to our organization. In 2015, IAAPS lost one of its vibrant and activist member, Dr. Rajashree Bosu, who was active till Tezpur Biennial. At this glorious moment of IAAPS, we miss all of them and remember their unforgettable contribution to the organization. Thank you.
So we formally end up here with a good hope that we will meet again after 2 years. And with this note of my sincere personal thanks to all of you, we end up here. And keep your good wishes for YAPS for further growth and prosperity. Thank you very much.